So yeah, thanks again for doing this.
My
Um,
pleasure.
I guess I just wanted to kind of start off with, is, have you always wanted to work in the film industry? And like, how did you get in? How did you get into the film industry?
I grew up in the business. My was an actor. He passed away about 7 years ago at 94, so he did just fine.
Wow.
Um, but he was a very well-known character actor on American television. He was on a show called I Dream a Genie through the 60s, and
Oh,
then on the Bob Newhart show, the first Bob Newhart show, and then many, many other things. He was so well known, and I didn't realize it because when he passed away, a good friend of ours called me and a friend of the family, a contemporary of my dad's, and said, "I'm going to get you a press agent." And I said, "I don't need a press agent." He goes, "Oh, no, you do." And I didn't realize how well regarded he was. I mean, it was my dad, right? So you just, oh, his dad's an actor, and you just think of it that way. And I mean, I got calls from the AP, from the Hollywood Reporter, from the Variety, from the New York Times. I mean, it was kind of overwhelming the amount of interest. And he was so well known that when he passed at the Academy Awards, that upcoming Academy Awards, he was in the, in remembrance, montage that they always have. And
wow.
when his image came up, there was a gasp from the audience because and one of the reporters, I think it was somebody in the Hollywood Reporter, said he wasn't a household name, but he was a household face. And it really struck me that he was as well known as he was, but not his name. He was never a star. He was always, the friend of the star on the show. On I Dream of Jeannie, he wasn't Larry Hagman. He was the other astronaut. He was Roger
Got you.
Healy,
Yeah.
and then Bob Newhart show, he was the next door neighbor, but he was just very well regarded that way. Anyway, I kind of went off on a thing, but so I grew up in the business. I grew up around it. Um, when my dad did the Newhart show that was out at CBS Radford, which is about 5 miles from my house, I would go by there after school and hike around, the western town where they shot Gunsmoke and so stuff like that. So I kind of grew up in the business. I wasn't planning on being through high school. I wasn't planning on being in the business. I was going to go into science, actually marine biology.
Wow.
And I changed my major, much to my parents' dismay, right about the year when I graduated. I said, I think I'm going to go into film. And they went, oh my God, gee, we thought you were out of it. And then I went to the California Institute of the Arts, which had been Walt Disney's art and design school. It was a Chenard Institute before Disney bought it over. And they had a phenomenal film program run by a famous British uh, director, Alexander McKendrick, who did The Man in the White Suit and The Lady Killers.
Oh,
And I
wow.
learned a lot in school. And I really gravitated towards documentary filmmaking. And there was a phenomenal teacher there, Terry Sanders. He was married to another documentarian, Frida Lee Mock, who ended up getting an Academy Award. And Terry hired me out of school to shoot documentaries, and I shot a couple of them for him. One of them got an Academy Award nomination. We shot it in '79, and in 1980 it got a nomination. Did not win, but that was my path. And then Ronald Reagan entered office and cut the budgets for everything, which is what Republicans do. They don't want to put any money into art. They want to put money into bombs, and so everything that I had planned in my life just went away. I was about to buy a camera. Documentaries were 16 millimeter at the time, not videotape, and so you had to own a camera. And I was going to buy a Claire ACL and start shooting documentaries. And Terry had and Frida had three films that they planned on doing: one on the Great Wall of China, one on the Vietnam Memorial, and one called Art Is. And I was going to work on all three of those. And over about a 4 or 5 month period, every one of them went away. I get the call saying, "Oh, we lost the funding for the Art Is film." Oh, geez. Well, thank God we have the other two. And then I'd get the call 2 months later. "Oh, we just lost the film for the funding for the Great Wall thing." Oh, okay. Well, thank God we got the Vietnam Memorial one. And then you get the final call. We lost that one too. And they ended up making it a couple of years later. And that's what Frida won an Academy Award for. It was on Maya Lin, the designer of the Vietnam Memorial. And so all of a sudden, I had no career. It was 1980, and I was done. I'm out of school. I was working as a draftsman for an architectural firm in between film jobs, and I was out of work. I had no film career, and so I called up all of my buddies that I went to film school with, and said, "Hey, you got anything?" Because film school is about your peer group. It's not about what you learn. It's about the people you get to know.
Right.
And I called them and said, "Hey, you got anything? What's going on? What do you got?" And one of them said, "Oh, hey, I'm shooting a $65,000 teenage slasher movie, just a piece of crap, right? But you can be the crew." So I drove the truck and laid the cable and set up the lights and pushed the dolly and just did everything. And I got paid like $75 a day, which was a fortune when you're 23 years old and, you're starting your film career. And, that's kind of how it started. And then, work begets work. So that show then got us another show, and it was an after school special, and the money got a little better. And then that one got another after school special, and the money got a little better. And after two or three of those, where I was kind of just doing everything, you kind of had to specialize. You kind of had to pick a discipline. You couldn't just be the crew. You had to be the gaffer, the key grip, or the camera assistant, or whatever. And I picked key grip because I kind of had an engineering and architectural background. I've been working as a drafting, so I thought, oh, it kind of makes more sense. And I kind of like putting things together. So I started my first job as a key grip, I think in 82. So I've been a key grip now for 20 or 43 years. Lots and lots of, credits and I'm 68 now, or just about to be. And I'm still working. I still enjoy it. People say, "When am I going to retire?" I said, "Geez, all my friends are there. Why would I want to leave?"
Yeah.
It is a very social business. And I have great friends all over the world. I've worked in 15 countries. It's great. It's fun. I
Wow.
worked in the UK. So,
Yeah.
which is rare. I mean, it's hard for Americans to come there and work. The British government's very protective of their film industry, as they should be. But I got to go there because I did something that wasn't available at the time in the UK. I worked as a programmer and an operator for these computer controlled winches that
Oh,
we
right.
fly people around. I did 3 Spider-Man movies and many other things, and I turned it into flying cameras. You've seen the cameras that they have at
Mm.
the sporting events.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's similar to that, and so I do a lot of that. It's not something that I advertise as a profession because there's not enough of it to sustain me as a business. So I'm a key grip by trade, but I do this on the side. When they come up, and mostly it's just for other friends of mine, key grips say, "Hey, I got a thing. You want to come out and do it?" And I come out and do it, kind of thing. And so usually, a week, I go out to a job and I do it for a week. I've done Transformers and many other movies, just flying cameras. It's fun. It's fun from an engineering point of
It
view.
does sound fun. It does sound, yeah, it does sound really fun. And, I found you via IMDb, and obviously checked out all your films, and you've done so many
I've been very
amazing
fortunate.
films that
I Yeah.
everybody will have seen at least one of them. Um,
Yeah, I always play the game. I always look at what's on TV. I run through all the 50 movie channels that are available to me, and I can usually find one.
yeah,
If
I bet.
one a day, and sometimes two or three. They go through cycles. Like Gangs of New York has been on a lot lately on one of the channels, and it's like, every day you can find Gangs of New York on somewhere. So,
That is one of the
and that's
films.
very fortunate.
That
Yeah,
is
that
one of
was a
the
great
films.
experience.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
sorry.
No, so I was just saying that's about as good as it gets from a filmmaking point of view. It was just I was working with my cameraman was Michael Ballhaus, who passed away a number of years ago. He was like a saintly grandfather. I loved working with that man. He was just appreciative and collaborative, and he wanted to hear my ideas and was thankful and would always if something was great, he would always point out if it was my idea. That was Pat's idea, and he's just so good about that. And I just loved working with him. And we were in Italy. We were in Rome, Italy. I was there for 11 months.
Wow.
The Italian work rules, you couldn't work more than 10 hours a day, which is not a Marty thing. Marty would work 15 to 18 hours a day, because he just never sleeps. And, you'd all die if we had to do that kind of schedule. But, it was 10 hours a day. So you go out to dinner at night, in Rome. And it was just, working with great people on a great script, getting paid a lot of money in a great place. It just never gets that good. And that was as good as it got.
That sounds amazing. That is one of the
Yeah.
films. I mean, I was looking at, you've done so many, but I did pick a few that I thought we might touch upon. And Gangs of New York was definitely one of those because I can remember, uh, seeing that when I was at university. I went with my friends, and it was one. It was, I guess, it was like the film of the year. It was the one that everyone was talking about at the
Yeah, it
time.
was great.
It was such a great
I would
film.
love to see Marty had a 3.5 hour version, and the studio medic made him cut it down to I think 3:05. So he cut 25 minutes out of it. So the end of it kind of bunches together a little bit, which is kind of unfortunate. It kind of rushes through the whole idea of the draft riots, which really happened. And that the American army was marching into Manhattan, the Union Army, and they were using, ships to shell lower Manhattan, which has really happened. It's a part of our history that we don't get taught that in school. We don't learn anything about that,
Yeah,
and that I think they rushed through it a little bit. I would have loved to have seen Marty's original version, would have been something. But I had a great time. It was as good, like I said, as good as it gets.
that sounds amazing. The again, I was looking at your films, and I think the first film that I saw that you would have been part of was Friday the 13th, Part 6. When I was
Yeah,
probably way too young to watch the film, but that did
yeah.
get me into the whole franchise. That was the first one that I saw. And did you work as a photographer on that film?
No, I was a key grip. The
Okay.
cameraman on that was a guy named Roy Wagner. Um, a very interesting man, very studied. He knew more about the history of cinematography than anybody I've ever met. And it was a low budget. It was a non-union show. It was low budget. I think it was. I think it was. Oh no, that was Nightmare on Elm Street. Sorry, you're talking about Friday the 13th. I did one of each of those. Those are my two slasher movies,
Oh, okay.
and I don't do any more of them. I never wanted to do another one because I just don't like gratuitous blood and violence. But Friday the 13th was shot by John Cranhouse, who was a contemporary. He's a guy I went to school. He's the guy that gave me my first job. He's the one who said, "Hey,
Oh,
I'm doing a
wow.
$60,000 feature." And years later, I ended up doing, you know, uh, Friday the 13th with him. That we shot that in Covington, Georgia. I think it was mostly nights. We're in the woods, mostly nights. The bugs are flying around. It was a miserable job, but it was a fun group, a fun community. Because we were staying in like nowhere, Georgia. There's nothing to do.
Yeah.
And we were working all night, so we'd come back to the hotel, and production made a deal. They'd open the bar for us at 7 in the morning, and we'd all go to the bar from 7 to 9:30 or something like that, and then go to bed and then get up and go to work all night. It was a lot of fun from that point of view. It was, that was the fun film community days, the bad old days, as we like to say, where you'd work 15 hours and not get paid great, but you thought you were in the industry. It's a lot of
Yeah.
fun.
Sounds
Yeah.
amazing. And
Yeah, it was.
and another film from I think it was 1988. Um, and this is a film that I saw again when I was young, and I like talking about 80s and 90s films with people. And usually I say
Hmm.
like, oh, when I'm talking to people, I describe this film where electricity in the house kills people,
Oh,
and they always look at me blankly
Pulse.
like that's the one, yeah.
Yeah.
And most people
Yeah,
haven't heard of it.
that was fun. That was trying to remember the details. I think that was shot by Peter Collister. He was the director of photography. Another guy I kind of grew up with. Not in film school. I met him afterwards, but he's a contemporary my age, and we did a few things together, like Avenging Angel, like back in the bad old days. But Pulse was kind of a real movie. We had beautiful sets that we built. We had two stages at a place called Occidental Studios, which is a very small studio in Los Angeles. It had a glass roof originally. It was one of those places that goes back to silent films where they used the sunlight
Oh wow.
to illuminate. So it was a very old studio, and we had fun on that. That was a good show. That was a lot of fun. A lot of those movies, Nightmare on Elm Street, Pulse, many others. I did with a very close friend, a gaffer named Jim Tynes, who was kind of my collaborator for a big portion of my career. I think we did 30 something movies together. And Jimmy passed away 5 or 6 years ago. It was like, I'm at the age now where I'm losing my friends.
Yeah.
And I mean, dying in your 60s is young. And Jimmy was like 62 or something like that, but it happens. And you kind of start to realize your mortality when you start losing your friends.
Yeah.
But I spent more time with Jim probably than anybody else on the planet because we did so many movies together, and he was a good friend. And, I've been married now for 45 years. I think I spent more time with Jim than my wife, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh wow. That's great.
But Pulse, I don't have any stories about Pulse. It was just a movie. The director was a really neat guy, and I can't remember his name, but it was a fun group. I think the kid who starred in it, I do remember this. I think his name was Joey Lawrence. He ended up becoming a teen star later on. He was
Yeah.
10 or something when we did the movie, but he became like a teen idol star. He's on some other TV show. And I remember that we got him as a gift with his father. His father was around. With his father's permission, we got him a Swiss Army knife. And I remember he kept having band-aids all over his fingers because he was cutting himself with the knife. Finally it's like, oh, maybe we shouldn't have given him the knife. But yeah, it was a good operation. It was fun.
I didn't realize that that actor was Joey Lawrence
Yeah, I'm
until
pretty
now.
sure I got that. I'm pretty sure I'm correct about that. I'd have to look it up on IMDb. Pretty sure it was Joey Lawrence. Well, whoever it was, if I'm getting the name right, he did become a teen star. That part I got right. I'm just not sure if the name's right. I think that's it. It was a
Yeah.
long time ago.
Yeah, it was. Yes, that was 1988. Another film that he did that year, and I hadn't heard of it, but it's got an awesome title. Earth Girls Are Easy.
Yes.
And it's got quite a very strong cast. It's Gina Davis and there's
Jeff Goldblum and
yeah, yeah,
Julie Brown and Damon Wayans and Jim Carrey. I mean, it was a phenomenal
yeah,
cast. Michael McKean. Yeah, that was a phenomenal cast. It was directed by Julian Temple, an Englishman, and the DP was Oliver Stapleton, another Englishman. I did several movies with Oliver, and that show was a lot of fun.
yeah,
And yeah, it was just fun. The music was great. Julie Brown did some really fun songs. It was just a laugh a minute on that show, and very crafted, very stylistic. Um, yeah, it was a lot of fun. That was a fun show. We mentioned, I think before we started recording, I said I'm the right guy for these kind of interviews because I love to talk.
hmm
Oliver, the gaffer on that was a guy named Jack English, and Jack's just like me. Jack has a million stories, as I do, and Oliver came to us and said, "All right, Pat, you get Mondays and Wednesdays. Jack, you get Tuesdays and Thursdays for storytelling. On Friday, I don't want to hear a thing from either of you. And that came from Oliver Stapleton.
That's
You know,
awesome.
yeah, he's good.
Yeah,
I ended up doing another movie. I did another movie with him some years later called Pay It Forward with Haley Joel Osment, who I had worked on with Forrest Gump. And he was a fine young man, really, really a crafted actor. He really thought about it very hard. For such a young actor, he was really together, and a pleasure to work with. And that was a fun movie. Mimi Leader directed that, and she was an interesting woman to work with. She was very appreciative and nice.
I haven't actually seen that film, but Forrest Gump is definitely one that I wanted to touch on today, because that must be, most people must have seen Forrest Gump. It's a lot of people's favorite movie. So yeah, do you have any good memories or bad memories from working on Forrest Gump?
Yeah, I mean, it is to date the hardest I've ever worked in my life. Just the pace of the show. We did 14-hour days, and we were staying in Beaufort, South Carolina, where most of the movie was shot. We were shooting in a town called Conyers, which is like 45 minutes away, and that was the little town, that Forrest came from, and that's where the house was that had the long oak alley there, and it was really, really difficult. Not difficult emotionally. It was just a great show to work on. It was you knew you were making something really terrific. Tom's phenomenal. Bob Zemeckis is one of those guys who wants everybody's idea. He'd come to the set and he'd describe what he wanted to do, and they go, guys, what do you want to do? How should we do this? And he kind of talked about it. Very good, kind of animated. And I'd say, well, if I took the back wall of the house off, I could bring the crane arm in, and then we could come out the window. And he'd go, I love it. Let's do that. And so he was very kind of open to any idea. He just was a filmmaker, was a total filmmaker, and wanted it to be cinematic all the time. The camera never stopped moving. I had 5 or 6 cranes, because we would do so many scenes. There's like 450 scenes in the movie, and we shot it in like 73 days, wow. In many states, and we were all over the country. Mostly in Georgia. We were in LA, we were in Arizona, Utah, Nevada, Maine, Georgia, North Carolina. We were all over the place. And it was a great experience. The director was a guy named Don Burgess, and I'd done some smaller stuff with Don. And this Don had done smaller movies and big second units, like Back to the Future and stuff like that. Backdraft, really, really talented cameraman. And Don, this was his career break. He's on an A-list movie with a great director as the director of photography, and he wasn't a kid. He was like I said, a talented man, done many things since, and but he knew that this was it. If he gets this right, he's set. And so he was very focused on making the film, and we did it. It was hard, but like I said, I had many cranes. I have like one day we called it the Big Crane Day. We started out at the mailbox for the finale of the movie, which was Forrest putting his son on the bus and then sitting down and the feather floating away and all that kind of thing. So we started there. That was 2 cranes, a crane on top of a crane to fly it up into the sky. And then we moved on to the Oak Alley for another thing. I can't remember what it was, but another bit. And then we moved from there out to the Jenny's house and the cornfield for the whole cornfield thing, where we have this long dolly track and then, this crane thing where make me a bird so I can fly far. And we flew back with that. And that was like one day. And so it had like 3 or 4 moves, all on the same property, but the property was 100 acres. So it was, if it had to go into a truck and drive somewhere, it's a move. I don't care if it goes 200 yards or 2 miles, right? Doesn't matter. You still got to move it and then unload it. And so that was one day, and it's like, and every day was like that. Every day was like, okay, we're going to go here now. And you pack up and you go over there and then you come back, because there's 400 and something scenes, but they were all short. They were always 1-shot scenes or 2-shot scenes, so we ended up just working our ass off. And, you come back exhausted every day. And we started out doing 6-day weeks. And I think they realized that we just can't do this. This is just too hard on people. We need to give people a break. And so they dialed that back. We still ended up working weekends on occasion. Sometimes a small crew would get in an airplane and fly to Maine to do 2 shots of Tom running up to a lighthouse, turn around and running back, and you do 2 of those a weekend. You go to Maine, then you go to Wyoming and do Tom's brother running down a road. Because Tom's brother looks just like him with the beard and everything, looked just like him. He doubled. A lot of that running stuff was done by a car commercial group, Friends of Don's, who just did car commercials, and they knew every beautiful road in America, right? They knew the one with the stone bridge and the wonderful vistas of the reflection of the lake. They just knew all of these. And so they just got extra money. That's actually a great story. But they came up with more money to hire this group. It was $1.5 million to fly all over the country with Tom's brother and just do running stuff. Just have guy running down road, guy running away from camera, guy running past camera, guy running across the bridge. And they did that for a couple of weeks. Wow. And the great story behind that is Sherry Lansing, I think, took over Paramount after the show was greenlit. And as typical in Hollywood, when the new administration comes in, they want to distance themselves from everything the previous administration had started. So they didn't really get Forrest Gump. They didn't really like it. It wasn't their movie. It was from the old administration. So they kind of just had a hard on for Forrest Gump, and they didn't get it. They were pissed off, and they wanted to kind of fire somebody. And the line producer was a wonderful guy named Charles Neuwirth, fantastic guy. And they just wanted to get rid of Charles. They wanted to, kind of exert their power over Bob Z. And they sent a couple of henchmen, a woman, I can't remember her name, but another suit from Paramount named Larry Albuquerque. And Larry came, and I had history with Larry on another movie, but Larry came in, and this woman, I'll have to figure out what her name is one of these days when I tell the story, but they came in with the intent of making a change, right? And there was one really good restaurant in Beaufort that everybody ended up in every Saturday night. It was a kind of a Cajun, kind of a high-end Cajun place. And, little small restaurant, 15 tables, and it had a big picture window in the front of it. And I was in there eating with somebody one night, and Larry and this woman were also eating at that restaurant. And you could see out the window, a car screeched up, and Bob Zemeckis got out. And he goes up and he puts his thing, and he's looking in the window of the restaurant, and he sees the producer, he sees Larry and this woman, and he comes in and he goes, "Get out of here, come here, get out of here," right? And he drags him outside, and he's yelling at him in front of all of us. I mean, there was a big picture window when we were watching this, he's cussing at him. "You get out of town. I don't want to," he's going on, and he's screaming at him. And half the crew's in there just watching this going, "Oh my God, we get a floor show." And we came back to work the next Monday, and Larry wasn't around, and neither was this other person. They went and hid in Florida, apparently. They just left. They couldn't go back to Paramount, and they couldn't fire Charlie Neuwirth. And, we ended up finishing the movie, obviously, and it turned out to make $1 trillion or something absurd like that. I exaggerate, but I think it did make $1 billion. I mean, it was ridiculous money. And, but they wanted to kill it. So anyway, I was telling you the story about the car company. Mm. The car company, that they wanted to hire, that Bob and Don Burgess wanted to hire to go do all this running stuff. They needed a kind of a $2 million budget, and Paramount wouldn't give it to them. They say, no, we're not going to, we're not going. You got your money. This is it. And they just said, but we need this. It's perfect for the movie. They said no, and so the producers Steve Starkey and Bob and Tom Hanks gave back money, gave
Wow.
from their salary back to the show for the purpose of doing this running thing. But as a result, they said, well, we want points in the film. And Paramount said, yeah, sure, because they didn't believe in the movie. So that $500,000 investment or whatever it was each of them gave, ended up paying dividends.
I can
I don't know
imagine.
the amount, but a lot. It was like a really good investment. One of those, and that's one of those kind of like crazy Hollywood stories. Like, how could anybody not see this movie to be what it could be?
Yeah.
All the crew did. We saw it. You saw it. And if I recall, I don't think there were any colored pages to the movie. The script we got at the beginning of the show is the script we shot. It wasn't like you have some shows where you're getting 15 pages a day. They're rewriting things, and it's like a rainbow. Your script is all these colored pages. It was a white script from beginning to end. It just hit every note perfectly. And the right director, the right guy. Music was a huge part of it, and Bob loved music. It was just, it was one of those great, perfect little film experiences, but still really hard to do, just physically hard. The schedule was hard. The location was 100 degrees and 90% humidity. You're just wet and dripping. To where your shoes are wet. When you're sweating that much and your socks
Oh,
and your shoes are wet, you just like, ooh, but it was tough. I got to do some good stuff though. I pulled a lot of good ones out of my hat. All that running stuff we did, on the football field and the Vietnam stuff and the boy running. I took a quad runner. We actually got a 6-wheel quad runner. I had them buy it for me, and I built track wheels for it. It ran on track, and so we'd lay down. I think we had 300 feet of track. We laid down this long track, and then I would drive along that, and it would tow a trailer, a little caboose that also ran on track, and we put cameras on it. So like all the Vietnam stuff with Tom running, and Tom runs, man. He is a hard runner, and I'd just be driving right next to him, And then I had one of the guys down at the end of the track who would just yell at me, "Stop!" And I'd hit the brakes and come to screech to an end and not go off the end of the track. But that was really fun. That was that. It was a good show for invention. I had a lot of prep time, which is also rare. I think I had a month of prep, because we got to make all the stuff, which was fun.
it is. It's definitely one of those films where you can tell by watching it how challenging it would have been to make, but it really pays off because it's an amazing film.
Yeah, thank you.
Technically and
I can take some technical bows, but the content, you just got to give it back. It was a great script and great acting, the right people involved. Michael Ballhaus's son, cameraman I worked with, told Florian, he's also a director of photography. Florian wasn't on the show, but when he heard that I did Forrest Gump, he said, "Wow, you really got your money's worth out of that movie." And I always thought that was a great review. He said, "You got every nickel that you paid to watch a movie. It's like it paid off. Everything about that movie paid off," which is really nice.
yeah, and it's one of those films that has just lasted. It's people are still discovering it today. The younger people that I work with sometimes who when I speak about films, it's just it's kind of going through the generations now. It's one of those films that's just going to
Yeah,
keep on
it is.
going, I think.
I agree. It's kind of timeless, because it covers so much time. It's a timeless movie of its own. I think it's great.
Yeah, and yeah, every time I watch it, I seem to notice something that I hadn't noticed before. And it's probably because I was very young when I saw it the first time, and I didn't appreciate
Hmm.
a lot of the historical events that that are taking place throughout the film. But every time I watch it, I seem to notice something else that I hadn't
Yeah,
spotted. Hadn't spotted. So yeah, it's definitely a great film.
it sure is. It sure is. And like I
And
said, hard to work on, but well worth it. We all knew it.
yeah, definitely, yeah, yeah. The end result was amazing.
Hmm.
And just 90s films in general. There's something about 90s films, the aesthetic and that I really like. So another one that you did in the 90s was Air Force One with Harrison Ford.
Right. That was
Um,
Michael Ballhaus shot that. Yeah. That was
almost,
Wolfgang Peterson film.
right, yeah. Almost entirely on a plane.
Yeah, it was a set. I mean, it was one of those things that we started the movie at an airport in Columbus, Ohio, Rickenbacker Field, where we did all the stuff where the airplane lands and then, the terrorists take over and it takes off and people are diving out of the way, and all that kind of stuff. And we had a real 747 that we had painted. And it was, I actually have a good story. Um, the very first day of shooting, they wanted to do a 2-pass camera shot with a motion control camera of the airplane going right over the camera. And then they were going to do the second pass of people diving out of the way. They weren't going to have real people next to the airplane careening over the camera, because it's an enormous machine. And they lined it. They tugged the aircraft over, and it's sitting there, and it's big. It's 3 stories tall, and it's a 200 something foot wingspan. It's a big airplane, and they're setting the camera up on the ground, and it's like I'm looking at the camera on the ground, and this is Boss Films, the motion control, the visual effects, their camera, their equipment. We really have nothing to do with it, right? So I'm just kind of watching. I'm watching what they're doing. And I look over and I get a tape measure and I measure the top of the camera. And it's like, oh, that's like 42 inches, And then I go over and I measure the bottom of the engine. And I'm going, well, that's like 56 inches or, whatever it was. It was low. And then I kind of measure the track of the airplane away from the wheels. Well, that's only like 7 feet from the wheels. And I'm looking at that going, is this thing in danger at all? I mean, do we need to worry about this thing? We got a jet engine, just feet from it, in a 400,000 pound airplane or whatever it was, going to, go, And I said, is this in danger? Oh, no, it's fine, it's fine. I said, yeah, I don't know. I mean, is there going to be a jet blast coming out of there's a jet engine right there. It's going to go right over the top of it. Oh, no, it's fine. Well, let's bring the pilot down. So they get the stairs that go up 3 stories, and the pilot comes out and comes all the way down the stairs, and he's given a bunch of tech talk. We got the aviation guy with us, and they're saying, "Oh no, we'll be spooling down, and it'll be cold stream, and it won't be." It's like, okay, I'm looking at this, going, should we put up a blast deflector? I mean, just a little plywood structure. I mean, it can easily make one. And I'm like, hey guys, let's build a blast structure. I need it this. I'm not having them build it, right? And I'm saying, should we do this? No, I think we're fine. We'll be okay. And I'd sit there, and this is taking a long time. And I'm like looking at it going, you sure you don't want to do this? I mean, I just have it. It's easy. It's right over here. I can just bring it in and just put it down, little blast structure, just in case. No, Pat, they say we're fine. You sure? Because it's right here. It'll just take a second. I bring it in, won't get in the way, won't hold anything up. I could just put it. Pat, we're fine. They said we're fine. We're fine. Okay, done. You're sure we shouldn't? I mean, I'm really pushing this. Finally, I get shut the hell up. We got it. We're fine. They said we're fine. Okay, right? And I turn around. All my stunt guy friends were sitting on one of the tailgates. I go, watch this. We're about to eat a camera, right? And so everybody gets back. They push the 747 back a couple 100 yards. And it's back over near the control tower, and there's a bunch of trees around the control tower. And we had like Malibu lights lighting up the trees, and we had staked them into the ground, right? And they spool this jet up, and they're, put the power to it. They're blowing the lights out of the ground. They're going and they're like flying off into space. The trees are, and we're going, oh my God. And this thing goes over the top of the camera, and it looked to me like a stack of Dixie cups getting hit by a fire hose. The camera just disintegrated. It just went, blew into a million pieces. There's film and pieces of the camera tumbling off onto the tarmac, completely gone, destroyed. It's $1 million camera, gone. Because it's like a VistaVision motion control thing, gone. Wow. Not two pieces put together. And I turned around and took a bow. I went, what did I say? They were not happy about that. And so the next night, Michael Ballhaus, the DP, comes up and he goes, Pat, I go, yes, sir. He goes, we're going to do that shot again. I went, oh, okay, great. And he said, what camera was it? We're going to use my camera. I said, you want a blast deflector, don't you? He goes, yes, we do. And we put up a blast deflector and it was fine. So, and then the cap to this story is 8 or 10 months later, I get a phone call from an insurance adjuster that's calling me saying that, Boss Films is putting in $1 million claim for the loss of their MoCo system in their camera. And he's saying, well, they were asking for a blast deflector and you refused to do it. I went, really? I said, I can introduce you to about 35 people who were standing around where I was arguing for one. 2 of them are producers, and I was told to sit down, and I never heard from them again. So, yeah, they were trying to claim that I had refused to do the work, this Boss Films. So pretty shitty, because I certainly wasn't, but yeah, crazy. But that was the first night of shooting. Wow. And then we went on, and it was a great film. Harrison's a great guy to work with. He's just one of those guys that shows up to work ready to work. He's there to, at one point, I think he chipped a tooth and broke a finger doing one of the fights, and the stunt coordinator, Doug Coleman, was the stunt coordinator, great guy. And Doug went to Harrison and said, hey, why don't we get Billy to, I got a double. Let's let Billy take some of the hits. And Harrison says, are you kidding? For $20 million, they can turn me inside out, So that's who he was. He was just one of those guys who was there to make the movie. It was kind of fun.
I've heard stories about Harrison Ford wanted to do a lot of his own stunts.
Yeah, he's into making the movie. He wants to make the movie, and I think he's slowed down some. He's 75 years old, or I don't know how old he is, but he just not into that anymore. But he's a good guy. He was a good guy to work with.
And something you said when we were talking about Forrest Gump, actually, you said, you and the rest of the crew, you felt that the film was going to be a success. Is that something that you can kind of tell usually when you're working on a film, whether it's going to be successful or not, whether it's going to...
Forrest was obvious. Yeah, Forrest was obvious, right? That one was an easy call. I've been wrong often, where I thought the movie was going to be better than it was, or received better than it was. The movies aren't always bad. Sometimes they're just not received well. One of the movies that I did that didn't do great business when it first came out, but it's kind of a perennial now. Everybody watches it. It's kind of more popular now than it was when we made it, was The American President, which was Rob Reiner picture. And it was a good film. It looked good, and it was, beautiful actors in it and terrific story. But it just didn't do the business I thought it would do initially. But people rediscover it, and it's like it holds up. It holds up quite well. Yeah. Again, this is the opinion of the key grip, right? I'm looking at it from many different angles. I'm not looking at it from the writer's point of view. But I'm a film fanatic. I love movies. And so I look at them from a watchable point of view. I did one recently. The last international thing I did a movie called The Glass Onion, which was the Knives Out sequel. Ryan Johnson. And that was a terrific picture. And I thought I thought it did quite well. And I think it did well also, but it's hard to tell now because it was Netflix. It was in the theater for an hour, and then it was, then it's on Netflix. So I don't know how well it did. But I liked it very much. I thought it kind of hit every note it was supposed to. As Florian Ballhaus would say, you got your money's worth out of that film, I thought,
I enjoyed it. Yeah, I liked the first Knives Out. No, sorry, Knives Out film as well. I thought they were both great films.
Yeah, they have another one coming out. They shot in the UK. They've got a third one coming out pretty soon. I would have loved to have done it, but the UK, it's hard to. They don't take key grips to the UK, So
Right. Okay. And James Bond, you were Quantum of Solace. You worked on Quantum of Solace in so that
yeah,
was 2008. That was quite
yeah. That
a
was
huge
that was the
film.
film that I did in the UK. That I was flying cameras on. That I was not the key grip. Key grip was an Englishman named Kenny Atherfold, who is a phenomenal key grip. I think he's passed away. He did Children of Men and other things. Really brilliant man,
Okay.
and a good guy. We got along quite well, but I was there for a different purpose. I just did mostly in Italy, in Siena. We did stuff in the James Bond studio at Pinewood. I was there for about a month, and we did the whole thing at the fight at the beginning where Bond tackles the guy and they go out the thing and then fall through the glass roof. That was all us. And then I did a bunch of flying camera stuff on the rooftops of Siena. It was the beginning of the movie. The beginning of the movie in the Bond films always has that big action sequence that gets you to to
Yeah.
the inside of the barrel and the title sequence. And so I worked on the whole upfront portion of that. That was directed by Dan Bradley, a phenomenal second unit director. He does Bourne movies and Bond and Jurassic Park, and he's really a talented guy. When it comes to action, man, no one's better. He's really good.
Wow. So, do you have any like kind of favorite directors or favorite kind of styles?
I think my favorite director to work with, probably Mike Nichols. I did two Mike Nichols pictures. I did Primary Colors, which was quite good. And then I did a movie that failed miserably, a thing called What Planet Are You From? It was fun to work on with Gary Shandling, but there was a lot of behind the scenes angst over Gary. It just, it didn't quite pay off, unfortunately. That's one that I thought would be received better than it was, but it was fun to work on. And Mike was such a brilliant guy to be around. My father was an actor, started off as a musician and comedian. So to work with Mike Nichols, who had three careers basically. I mean, he invented improvisational comedy, he and Elaine May, which was kind of amazing. And then he went into theater and did, he and Neil Simon partnered up and he did all those great Neil Simon plays, in the very beginning. And that was his second career. And then he decided, I'm going to go make movies. And his first two movies are Virginia Woolf and The Graduate. I mean, won Academy Award nominations, or did he win? I can't remember. But I mean, like that's this guy, and so he was just so smart and so brilliant and interesting. And when I met him, we got on his private jet to fly to Miami to scout, and so the department heads, there's 10 of us or so, were on the jet flying, and he starts asking me about Alexander McKendrick, the dean of my film school, because he was a huge fan of his films. And
Oh,
so I'm going, wow, here's this huge director, who's interested in who the key grip went to, school with, and I thought, that's really interesting. Here's a guy. Well, first of all, who knows that? I don't know who people went to school with or the dean of the film school they went to. Who knows that? But he knew it, so it's like this guy studies people. He finds out about everybody who's going to be standing around him and he learns about them. I thought that was really interesting that he had discovered things about me and was interested. It just seemed so extraordinary. And so he was really amazing to work with. I loved working with Scorsese. Um, Marty always picks one crew guy that's his buddy, and it happened to be me. I lucked out because I'm a film fan, he's a film fan, and we kind of got together that way. I got a couple of good stories there. But in the very beginning, everybody said, don't talk to Marty. Don't look him in the eye. Don't stand behind him. Don't make any noise. Don't bother him. I mean, it's like, oh, come on, man. I gotta work with this guy and I can't talk to him. So I think the very first day we were doing makeup tests, pre-shooting, and I just said, screw it. I'm going to just start talking to him. And if I cross the line, they'll let me know and I'll back off. Right. And so I just went up to him and started talking to him about movies. And I brought out a question because he is a historian. Right. And I went up and said, Marty, maybe you can help me. There's a movie I saw and I only saw it once. It was about this whole community that starts hearing this voice coming through the radio, and it's the voice of God. And they're all kind of like wondering, who is this? And they all hear it all week. And then on Sunday, he's going to give the big sermon, and they go to the big sermon. Everybody's standing by waiting to hear God speak. And he doesn't say anything, but the community came together. And that's kind of the point of the movie. And he goes, oh, yeah, that's called The Last Voice You Heard. It was done in 1963. And it was done. There's a great story about it. And he's like going on and on about it. And it's like, and I was in from then on because I was a film buff and I was in. And it was just one of those things. I could talk to him about anything. And Joe Reedy, who was the first AD, used to use me when Marty was in a shitty mood. He'd go, Pat, go talk to Marty. He's in a shitty mood. And I'd go talk to him, and he'd come out of it. And one day, it was early in the film, a couple weeks in, my position after we were done lighting and we were shooting, I usually sit down close to Video Village and I'm just watching my cameraman. I'm watching Michael, just because I can tell him if he goes, if he looks at something, I'll go, Mike, what's the problem? What'd you see? So I'm just paying attention to my boss. And so I'm watching Video Village, and Marty's there, and Michael, and the script supervisor. And Marty goes off on something. I can't remember what it was, but it was some wardrobe screw up or makeup or something. I don't remember what it was, but it was like, those guys, I'm going to come in there. I'm going to start yelling at these guys. What you tell them to stay in there? And he's like going on and on and on. He's really pissed, right? And a little backstory is like, previous in the week, we had been kind of, all of us on set kind of been doing Monty Python bits, like What the Prince, right? Doing little riffs on Monty Python. And so Marty's going, you keep them in there. And Jody, I'm going to bring them all in there. I'm going to yell at them, and he gets up and he walks by me and he stops. He turns to me, he goes, What the Prince? And he starts talking to me about Monty Python. And he goes on for like 2 or 3 minutes. Goes, that scene, that's exactly what directing's like. He'll tell the guy to go here and go, yeah, but what if I go over here? No. Just go over here and say the line. And he's like going on about Monty Python. And Joe Reedy, the AD, is standing there waiting for him to go in and scream at the makeup or wardrobe people. And he turns to Joe. He goes, Joe, what are we waiting for? And he goes, nothing, Marty. You ready to go? Okay, let's go. And he goes back and he sits down. And Joe turns to me and goes, this is good, So he started using me just to distract him and take him off whether he was about to go yell at somebody and then, ricochet him off somewhere else. And it was a lot of fun. He was a lot of fun that way. I mean, it was a long show. We had 165 shooting days. I mean, it just went on and on. It was so really long. And like I said, it was short days and wonderful people to work with on a great project. And it was a lot of fun. But another favorite story about that show is we came back from hiatus. We shut down for 2 weeks during Christmas, and everybody went home. We had Englishmen. They went to the UK. We went back to the States. And when everybody came back, as usual, you're all standing around going, hey, how was your Christmas vacation? What'd you do? And people are telling, go, Marty, what'd you have fun at Christmas vacation? Oh, yeah, had great. I watched a lot of movies, watched Creature from the Black Lagoon, and I'm going, really? Creature from the Black Lagoon? Usually it's Miracle on 34th Street, but, Creature's a good Christmas movie. And he's laughing. I said, somebody ought to redo that. Somebody ought to remake that movie. And he goes, you're right. Yeah, someone should. I said, because, the creature really wanted to get the girl, right? And they couldn't do it in 66. You're right. Somebody ought to do it, right? End of conversation. Went on. About a year later, and the movie Gangs they held the release for a couple of years because of 9/11. 9/11 happened right after we got back. And there's, I don't know how many firemen were killed, and we didn't make firemen look too good in that movie, right? So they didn't release it out of that respect. And, also the buildings collapsing and the end of the movie, there's all this white dust, a little too reminiscent. So they held the release of the movie for a couple of years. So about a year afterwards, I was flying. I had at one time I had an airplane and I was flying, and you turn your phone off when you're flying. I was just flying around, and when I landed, I turned my phone on, and it lit up. I had like a half a dozen calls from my wife. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot a portion of. Sorry, I forgot a portion of the story. They held the release, and so we went back. We went to New York about a year after we had originally wrapped and reshot the end of the movie. It was 2 days of shooting. We did it on stage, and I was there for the reshoot. And in that year, I had talked to a friend of mine who was a screenwriter, and I told him the story about the creature from the Black Lagoon and so what I do. And my friend said, "Well, let's do it. Let's write a script." I said, yeah. He said, "Nah, come on, it'll be fun." Right? So we wrote a Creature from the Black Lagoon script, a modern version. And we spent several months on it, and we finished. It was pretty presentable. Wasn't bad. And so I got out of order with my story here. So when we went to do the reshoots, saw Marty. I said, "Remember you and I talking about Creature from the Black Lagoon?" I said, "I did it. My friend and I wrote a script." He goes, "Give it to me. I want it. Let me have it." I went, "Okay, yeah, I'll send you a copy." So I sent him a copy. Right. So then after that, I'm flying and I'm landing and my phone lights up and it's all my wife. And I'm thinking something horrible happened, fire or some death in the family or something awful. And I get on my phone. She goes, "Marty just called you. He wants to talk to you about your script." I went, "What?"
Wow.
She goes, "Who the hell gets that call?" I said, "I don't know." So I call him. I call his office, right? She said, "Here's a number. He's expecting your call." So I call his office. I get, his hi, this is Pat Daly. Marty called. "Oh, yes, he's expecting your call." Transfers over, comes on. "Okay, great, Pat. So what I got, on page 53, you got this whole thing. I don't know what this does, but I like this part of it." And he starts going. And I'm like standing in the hangar at my airplane. I don't have the script in front of me. So I'm like, I throw out a sectional, which a piloting chart, and I'm writing notes on the sectional. He's like going for 20 minutes. He's telling me, "I love this. Expand on this more. Get rid of this whole thing. I don't like this." And he's going on and on. I mean, really detailed criticism and praise. He goes, "Really good effort. I like it. Send me this when you get it redone." I
Wow.
mean, it's unbelievable. I call up my friend, and we ended up using a lot of what Marty told us and rewrote it and sent it to him and never heard anymore. I mean, that was just the end of the story. But it's like, it was just one of those wild things. But I just had a great relationship with him. He was phenomenal film intellect. You'd watch him design shots, and they were really crafted, fun to watch. And all of the actors. I mean, everybody was so amazing. Everybody. I mean, Daniel Lewis is the finest actor I've ever watched in my life. You just, it was a master class every minute you watched that guy work, and he was a method actor. I mean, he was a soft-spoken Irishman, and he'd turn into Bill the Butcher, Monday morning, and he'd get in a wardrobe and he was Bill and he looked like this and he was like, this hard-edged New Yorker. And he'd stay Bill all week, and then Friday night at rap, he'd turn back into Daniel, and he'd be soft-spoken and wonderful, a sweet guy. And it's like, God, he's like a chameleon. It's unbelievable. You just change it. And Leo was just spectacular. He was so interested in the work. He never left the set. He was watching, even off-camera stuff that he wasn't in. He was watching at Video Village. He just really cared. Cameron was fantastic. All the character actors. I mean, Brendan Gleeson, phenomenal, phenomenal actor. He's done some great stuff since. I mean, The Guard is terrific. Cavalry is a brilliant movie. God, I mean, there's so many really great actors in that, and all the gang members, the Irishmen and stuff, have gone on to great things. I mean, the casting was spectacular. And I got to work with these people for almost a year. It was really great. Terrific.
Yeah, it sounds like a great experience, and that's one thing I won't. we've been here an hour already, so I don't want to take up too much of your time, but
I'm fine, whatever you need.
I've got a couple of questions about like reflections on your career and what is kind of one of the most memorable moments or something that you're most proud of.
I did a movie with Francis Coppola, Bram Stoker's Dracula, and it was probably the most crafted movie I was ever part of. Uh, all but 2 days of that movie was shot indoors on stage, on sets. We had this whole shadow thing that we were playing with. And Francis didn't want to use any modern filmmaking techniques. He wanted things to be scrims and smoke and mirrors and kind of old fashioned techniques. That was a big point of what he wanted to do. And I mean, we do things like light a set and photograph the set with a huge format camera, and then remove the wall, put in a scrim, and then project the set on the back of the wall. So you could have a guy doing shadows, and it's not perfect, right? It's humans, right? So it's not perfect. But we had another person being the shadow of Dracula on the wall, with Gary in the foreground, and it was stuff like that. And that was really fun. It was, like I said, very, very crafted. But we had one shot that it was one of those things, and Francis was just great to work with. And there was a scene, I have the whole movie, every frame of the film on storyboard. It's in 2 big volume books. And it was called The Score. And at the beginning of the movie, Francis would say, if it's not in the score, it's not in the movie. And we would follow it exactly. You'd hold up a page and go, okay, yeah, this is the angle. And then we ended up abandoning that because Francis thought it became a little too restricting. But I have these things, this whole film. But there was a scene as described was Harkin, who's Keanu Reeves, was standing in the middle of this dark forest, and this coach, this Kalish, comes up out of the mist, and is Dracula driving. You don't know it's Dracula, but the coachman, and he stops and he reaches out and he lifts Harkin up and puts him in the coach, right? So everybody says, okay, well, he's on a coach. He's 7 feet off the ground. Harkin's down there. It's magic, right? He reaches out and levitates him and some stuff like that. Okay, so that's what we had planned. And the special effects guy had this parallelogram teeter-totter that Harkin would stand on. And they expected Dracula to, wave magic fingers, and Harkin would fly up, and they were going to kind of levitate him into the coach. And so Francis comes in, and they got it all set up, and we look at it, and we show him the shot, and he goes, no, that's not what I want. No, I want his arm to stretch. I want him to be like Rubber Man. And everybody went, Rubber Man? It's like, who's got the big rubber arm? I mean, this is one of those completely caught off guard because no one had kind of drilled in on what Francis expected. They just read it and assumed it was this. Francis assumed we all understood he wanted the arm to stretch. And so we had nothing. I mean, there's no rubber arm. There was no nothing. And all we had was this teeter-totter that the visual effects guys had come up with, or the physical effects guys had come up with. And so we're all sitting there kind of scratching our heads going, what are we going to do? And I turned to Michael. I said, do we have to actually see his arm stretch, or we just have to see his hand go all the way to Harkin? And he goes, I don't know. What do you think? I said, I said, what if we start wide and zoom in on his hand as his hand reaches out? And you can go and look at the scene. And we just follow the hand all the way to Harkin's collar and pick him up and then zoom back out. Because when you start at the beginning, they're 8 feet apart. There's no way an arm's going to reach there. And so what we ended up doing is off the right side of the coach, we built a scaffold that had the dolly on it. And we put a huge, long diving board on the dolly and cut the seat out of the coach and put it on the diving board. And so all the pat all was Gary. All he had to do was sit there, and as his arm reached out, we just kind of pushed him sideways and moved his arm to hearken, and he
Wow.
grabbed him and then pulled it back. And so and it took like an hour and a half. It was like really fast. We just put it together. And Francis comes in, he's looking at all this. I think he wanted the day off. I think he threw the rubber arm thing at us, figuring, well, okay, this day's done, right? And so he came in, he's looking, and Michael says, don't watch what's happening, just watch the shot. And so he's looking at the monitor, and we do the shot for him, and Francis goes, can I swear here? Because this is what he said. He goes, that's fucking weird, man. I love it. That's weird. And that was the shot. And Michael, as I explained it earlier, he was very appreciative of your work. He just said, that was Pat's idea. Pat came up with that. And it was just it was a big, and Francis like shook my hand. He goes, yeah, you got it. And it was like, that was a really big moment for me. Because there's a filmmaker that, I think The Godfather is some of the two finest movies, one and two, the two finest movies made, and to have him, congratulate me on my collaboration, I think was pretty great. That's as good as it gets for our key grip, to have somebody of that stature recognize your input, which is pretty great.
It was a good idea. It was a great idea.
Yeah, it worked, and it worked well. And again, the movie was made in 93 or 94. It's an old film. You look at it now and you go, okay, well, it fits the process the film wanted, and the film wanted an old fashioned process. Like I said, smoke and mirrors and scrims and reflections, and that's how we made the movie. And that was kind of a big point of the film. So it fit that. There was nothing special there. It wasn't visual effects. It was just camera work. It's fun.
Yeah, well, that kind of leads me into my my last question, which is, what, if any, are some of the biggest changes that you've noticed in all of the decades that you've worked?
Yeah, 4.5 decades. The biggest change, obviously, is the digital cameras. And what it did, I think, really hurt the industry, because it's not uncommon for them just to keep rolling. They'll roll the camera for 10 minutes, and if you're doing handheld stuff, I remember walking onto a set to visit a friend, and it was a great camera operator, Andy Rollins, phenomenal camera operator. He was the camera operator on Gangs of New York, and went in to visit him, and he was working with the Panavision Genesis digital camera, which was like 40 pounds. It was they're smaller now, but it was a big beast. It was one of the first ones. He goes, look at this thing. I'm going, oh my God. He goes, we do 10-minute takes handheld. I said, I'm dying here. And I think what it did, because though you don't know when the camera's rolling anymore, they'll put the red light on and it's on for 30 minutes straight. So people start ignoring it, right? And, you never know when you're rolling. And they just keep it going. And I hate that. The whole focus of, okay, rolling, bell going off, marker, and you're rolling for 30 seconds or 2 minutes or whatever, everybody focuses on that. And now that's gone because it just keeps rolling. You got people talking during the shot now because they don't even know we're rolling anymore. And I think that's a huge mistake. I think it drains the focus out of the crew. It drains the craft sometimes, because digitally you can just fix anything. Back in the day, there were the superstar cameramen. I worked for one of them. Michael Ballhaus. I worked for John Seal, another superstar cameraman. Oliver Stapleton. Really great cameramen. And when it's filmed, they're looking at, the next day you get the report back. What are the lights? What are the printing lights? And they knew what it was going to look like, or had a notion of what it was going to look like. And maybe a couple other people kind of knew what it was going to look like, but you weren't sure. Now you can walk over to the monitor and you think, this is the finished product. You're looking at it. Anybody can have an opinion on it, and then they can just change it. they could change the framing. They can make it lighter or darker. And I think a lot of the craft is going away because they can just fix it later. I mean, the old joke, fix it in post. And I think that's sad. Um, I'm glad I lived through the age I did where it was craft and skill. And it's less of it now. It doesn't mean they're not making great films, and there's phenomenal stuff being made. I don't mean to denigrate, the filmmakers of today. I just think it's easier. I think that in some categories, the gaffer, the key grip, the director of photography, the operator, had to be better back then because you couldn't fix it. You could fix it a little, but not really, not to the extent that you can fix it now. They can reframe stuff. If the operator didn't get the shot the way they want, they'll just reframe it. It's like, man, back in the day, the operator was the god. The director said, we get it. Yeah, we got it. Or do we get it? I think I could do better. And you'd redo a take because the operator said I could do better. And none of that exists any longer. And I think that's a shame. It's a different business. Doesn't mean it's bad. It's just different from what I grew up in. Like that's one of the biggest changes. Another big change is, and I was fortunate to be part of that age, is I got to be taken places. I was in my cameraman's contract. You know, Michael would take a show. The gaffer, the operator, and myself were in his contract. You have to take these people. I don't care where we go, but you're taking them too. And I traveled all over the place. Like I said, a year in Rome doing gangs in New York. Nowadays, there's film crews everywhere. Even in the States, I would travel to every state. I'd go to New York. I'd go to, Atlanta. I'd go to Chicago. I'd go, wherever to make movies with a cameraman. I got brought along. Now there's crews everywhere, and they're good crews everywhere, and they're great. But so people don't get to travel as much anymore. The town you live in is the town you work in. And I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico now. I live here. I end up doing a lot of television, far few films. Doing The Glass Onion 4 years ago was rare. It came out of left field. I didn't think I would ever do go anywhere internationally. I've traveled a lot internationally because with the stunt guys doing the wire flying thing, the Bond picture. I did a thing in the Philippines, I did a thing in Australia, but that was all with that because that was a skill set no one had. They didn't have the equipment, they didn't have the skill set, but even that's changing. There's a lot more of this equipment around now. Stunt people still get brought places, but they don't take key grips to Australia. They don't take key grips to many places. So I got the best of it. I was part of the age where film was crafted. It wasn't just, the 70s stuff that came out. It was really crafted filmmaking. I got to work with superstar cameramen and got taken places. And I think that's all changing. So I lucked out there. That's one of the best sides of my career. I just happened to fit in that right time slot,
Yeah. And are you working on anything now out of interest?
No, I'm not. It's been really weird and slow here. I haven't. I've done a couple flying camera things and a couple little small unit stuff, but nothing right now. Of anything? I'm looking for a job. But yeah, nothing out there. There's a lot of talk. The industry in the U.S. has been depressed. I think it's the studios are pissed off about the last contract, so they're taking movies everywhere else. Every TV show I look at now is shot in Canada.
Right. Yeah.
The last show I did, Glass Onion, we shot in Greece and Serbia. We were in Belgrade, Serbia.
Wow.
Great crews, good guys, nice guys. Worked a little different, learned a lot from me. Because I'm a lighting key grip. I really enjoy lighting. I do the camera movement, the engineering stuff also, but they just do camera movement in Serbia. That's what grips do. They don't kind of participate in lighting. That's all just the electricians. And so we shot the American system. And so I was doing the grip side of lighting. And so they learned a lot from me, and they were great guys, but there are good crews everywhere. So they just don't take people anymore, But yeah, nothing right now. It's kind of depressed. There's some things talked about showing up here in New Mexico, but we'll see. Yeah, I'm 68. I don't need to work. It's just like I said, it's where all my friends are. So I want to go back to work just to work with my friends. So
Absolutely. Yeah. That's
yeah.
that's great to hear as well, like a family.
Oh yeah, very much so. I mean, you go to war together. The dolly grip on Forrest Gump was a guy named Jeff Howery. Moose was his nickname. Phenomenally talented dolly grip, and he had been Don's guy on previous movies, and he wasn't in the union, and he had qualified, but they disallowed it because he had flown from Carolina, where he lived, not from L.A. It was one of those technicalities that they used to keep people out. And when Don asked me to do the show, he said, "I'd really like to take Moose if you can figure out a way to get him there." And so I called in a favor at my union, which was Local 80, which is the grip union in Los Angeles, and asked if what they could do. And they looked at it and said, "Oh yeah, we'll just let him in because he qualified. They just disallowed it for some technicality. We'll just ignore it and bring him in." And so Moose and I became great friends. But when he was brand new to me on Forrest Gump, and so as we developing our friendship, he says, "You and I, we're going to war here," because it was, like I said, it was really hard. And he said, "At the end of this, we're either going to be best friends or never want to see each other again." And we ended up being best friends. We ended up, being really close friends. And he retired a couple of years ago. He's a big man. He was like 6'5", and just, it's hard shoving cranes around and pushing dolly. I think he was done, and so he just retired. And still a close friend. We try to keep in touch. Every quarter, every couple of months, we'll call and talk. I'm
That's great.
fortunate enough. Yeah, we did. Don did the last. I think actually both of them, the Aquaman movies, and I ended up going to Hawaii a couple of years ago for like 5 days of shooting in Hawaii, and it was day like 102 through 106 or something for the crew. They had been in
Wow.
stage in the UK, and so everybody wanted to go to Hawaii for the end of the movie. So they were on vacation, and I'm there trying to like, "Hey Don, what do you want to do? How about we'll do one of these?" He's going, "Yeah, Pat, whatever. I don't care. Just whatever. I'm done." And so I'm just freelancing stuff, and we brought Moose along on that, and that was a lot of fun. And that was Moose's last job. We all, it was Don and Moose and I. So it was kind of like completed the circle. His first job in Hollywood was a movie with me, and then his last job.
Oh, wow, that's
So
a
it was
great
kind of fun.
story.
Yeah, it was kind of fun.
Yeah.
I was very fortunate. The friends you make in any business, right? But I think because of the adversity of filmmaking, we work in the 110 degrees, you're out working. We work when it's freezing, you're out working. We work when it's pouring rain, you're out working. It doesn't matter. And so the adversity is so much, and everybody experiences it, that it is a little bit like going to war. It is, sometimes movies are just, we made it, but we have to kill ourselves to do it. And so the friendships you make are kind of on that level.
Yeah.
Not comparing it to guys who went to Vietnam together, but it's, it is that kind of a tightness. You have friends. I got friends all over the world, from working in Greece and Serbia and Australia and the Philippines and UK. I got friends everywhere, and I'm
Yeah.
fortunate that way. Yeah, it's great. It's a
From
lot of
that
fun.
shared experience.
From that shared adversity. Yeah.
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 It can get you. So.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for your time and for doing this interview.